Picture this. You're standing on a cliff overlooking an endless ocean, waves crashing against ancient rocks below. The salt air fills your lungs as you gaze into the horizon, wondering what secrets lie beneath those dark waters. For thousands of years, humanity has been captivated by one question that refuses to fade away. What if, somewhere beneath the waves, lies the greatest civilization our world has ever known? What if Atlantis was real? Welcome to a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about human history. I'm your guide through the shadows of the past, where legends meet reality and ancient mysteries demand answers. Tonight, we're diving deep into waters that most scholars dare not explore, following clues that stretch from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, from Egyptian temples to Mayan pyramids. But here's what makes this investigation different. We're not just chasing myths or fairy tales. We're following hard evidence, archaeological discoveries, and scientific findings that paint a picture so compelling it might just rewrite the history books. Because what if I told you that advanced civilizations existed thousands of years before we thought possible? What if the story of Atlantis isn't just Plato's imagination, but a fragmented memory of something far more extraordinary? Over the next hour, I'm going to take you on an expedition that spans continents and millennia. We'll explore 3 lost kingdoms that could be the real Atlantis, each more mysterious than the last. We'll examine cutting-edge underwater discoveries that have left archaeologists speechless, and we'll uncover evidence of ancient technologies so advanced they challenge our understanding of what early humans could achieve. Now, before we dive in, let me share something that will blow your mind. Just last year, marine archaeologists discovered something off the coast of Spain that shouldn't exist. Massive stone structures, perfectly aligned with celestial bodies, sitting 120 feet underwater. The dating, over 12,000 years old. That's older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than anything we thought early humans could build, but that's just the beginning. What I'm about to reveal to you comes from decades of research, diving expeditions to the world's most remote locations, and access to archaeological findings that most people never hear about. I've spent months analysing satellite imagery, studying ancient texts, and interviewing researchers who've dedicated their lives to solving this puzzle. The truth is, mainstream archaeology has been getting it wrong. For too long, we've been told that human civilization began around 6,000 years ago with the Sumerians. But the evidence I'm about to show you suggests that advanced societies existed much earlier, and their destruction gave birth to the legend we know as Atlantis. Think about it. Why do cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years all tell similar stories? Of a great flood that destroyed an advanced civilization? Why do we find megalithic structures on every continent, built with precision that rivals modern engineering? Why do ancient texts from Egypt, India, and the Americas all describe flying vehicles and technologies that sound like science fiction? The answer might be simpler than you think. What if these weren't separate civilizations developing independently? What if they were all connected to one source? One mother civilization that spread its knowledge across the globe before vanishing beneath the waves? Here's where it gets really interesting. Plato's account of Atlantis, written in 360 BC, contains details that he couldn't have known unless he had access to much older sources. He describes the island's location, its concentric rings of water and land, its advanced metallurgy, and its eventual destruction with a precision that feels more like historical documentation than creative writing. But Plato wasn't the only ancient author to write about lost civilizations. Egyptian priests told Solon, the Greek lawmaker, about Atlantis 9,000 years before their time. That would place its destruction around 11,500 years ago, coinciding with the end of the last ice age when sea levels rose dramatically across the globe. Now, imagine you're one of those Egyptian priests, keeper of ancient knowledge passed down through generations. Your temple archives contain records of a time when the world was different, when great islands existed in the Western Ocean, when ships travelled between distant lands carrying knowledge and technology that seems impossible for the ancient world. This is exactly what we find when we dig deeper into ancient Egyptian records. The Turin Papyrus mentions kings who ruled for thousands of years before the first dynasties. The Palermo stone describes a golden age that preceded known Egyptian history. Even the Great Pyramid's precision suggests knowledge that shouldn't have existed 4,500 years ago. But Egypt isn't the only place where we find these tantalizing clues. In the Andes Mountains of Peru, Massive stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons are fitted together with such precision that you can't slip a knife blade between them. The Inca, who built Machu Picchu, claimed they didn't build these older structures. They said they were created by a race of giants who lived before the Great Flood. Halfway around the world on Easter Island, nearly 900 massive stone statues stand as silent witnesses to a lost civilization. Recent excavations revealed that these heads actually have buried bodies, some extending 30 feet underground. Carbon dating of organic material found around these structures suggests they're much older than previously thought, possibly dating back to when the island was part of a much larger landmass. And then there's the Mediterranean, where new discoveries are rewriting everything we thought we knew about ancient history. In 2021, underwater archaeologists exploring the coast of Greece made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. They found the remains of a massive harbour complex complete with sophisticated drainage systems and what appears to be a lighthouse foundation. The structure is so large and complex that it would have required thousands of workers and advanced engineering knowledge to build. But here's the kicker: it's been underwater for at least 8,000 years, placing its construction in a time period when mainstream archaeology tells us humans were just beginning to develop agriculture. This is where our journey really begins, because if structures like this existed 8,000 years ago, what else might be hidden beneath the waves? What other evidence of advanced ancient civilizations lies waiting to be discovered in the deepest parts of our oceans? The more we explore these underwater sites, the more we realize that the end of the last ice age wasn't just a climate event, it was a civilizational reset. When the ice sheets melted 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose by over 400 feet, submerging vast coastal areas where millions of people likely lived. Imagine entire cities, harbours, libraries and temples disappearing beneath the waves in a matter of centuries. But some survivors escaped. They carried their knowledge to higher ground, to mountain tops and inland areas where they could rebuild. This explains why we see sudden bursts of civilization in places like ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. These weren't the beginnings of human advancement. They were the continuation of something much older, something that had been forced to start over after a global catastrophe. The evidence for this is everywhere once you know where to look. Ancient flood myths exist in over 200 cultures worldwide. The Aboriginal Australians tell of a time when the sea rose and swallowed the land. Native American tribes speak of islands in the Western Ocean that disappeared beneath the waves. Even the Hindu Puranas describe advanced civilizations that were destroyed by rising waters. These aren't coincidences, they're cultural memories of real events, passed down through oral tradition for thousands of years until they were finally written down. And at the center of all these stories is the same basic narrative: an advanced civilization that grew too proud, too powerful, and was ultimately destroyed by natural forces beyond their control. This brings us to one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for Atlantis' existence, the Younger Dryas period. Between 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, Earth experienced a dramatic climate shift. Temperatures plummeted, ice sheets advanced, and then suddenly everything changed again. The ice melted rapidly, causing massive flooding worldwide. What caused this dramatic climate shift? Scientists have proposed several theories, but one of the most intriguing involves a cosmic impact. Evidence suggests that around 12,900 years ago, Earth was struck by fragments of a disintegrating comet. The impacts would have caused massive wildfires, darkened skies, and triggered the rapid melting of ice sheets. If an advanced civilization existed at this time, such an event would have been absolutely catastrophic. Coastal cities would have been destroyed by tsunamis, inland areas devastated by fires and climate change. The survivors would have been forced to abandon their technology and focus on basic survival, leading to a dark age that lasted for millennia. But here's what's truly remarkable. As we'll see in the rest of this investigation, evidence suggests that not all knowledge was lost. Some of it survived, hidden in secret locations, passed down through mystery schools, and encoded in the architecture of monuments that still stand today. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, encodes mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio with precision that wasn't officially discovered until thousands of years later. Stonehenge's massive stones are arranged to track celestial movements with astronomical accuracy. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck, is a 2,000-year-old analog computer that could predict eclipses and planetary positions. These aren't the products of primitive civilizations stumbling toward progress. They're the legacy of advanced knowledge that somehow survived humanity's greatest catastrophe. As we continue this journey together, we're going to explore 3 specific locations where this lost civilization might have flourished. We'll dive into underwater ruins that challenge everything we think we know about the past. We'll examine artifacts that suggest ancient peoples had access to technologies we're only now beginning to understand. We'll travel to the Mediterranean, where recent discoveries suggest that Plato's Atlantis might have been based on a real island civilization that dominated the ancient world. We'll explore the Atlantic Ocean, where massive underwater plateaus might once have been above sea level, supporting millions of people, and we'll venture to the Pacific, where scattered island chains could be the mountain peaks of a sunken continent. Each location tells part of the story. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, and when we put it all together, a picture emerges that's both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it reveals that human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than we ever imagined. Terrifying because it shows how quickly it can all disappear. But there's hope in this story too, because if Atlantis was real, if these ancient civilizations really existed, then we're not alone in facing the challenges of our modern world. Others have walked this path before us. They've built great cities, developed amazing technologies, and reached for the stars. They've also made mistakes, grown too proud, lost sight of their connection to the natural world, and perhaps that's the most important lesson Atlantis has to teach us. That knowledge without wisdom, technology without humility, progress without respect for the planet that sustains us, leads inevitably to destruction. So as we embark on this investigation together, remember that we're not just exploring the past, we're searching for clues about our future, lessons that might help us avoid the mistakes of those who came before us. The ancient Egyptians had a saying, "As above, so below." What happened in the heavens was reflected on earth. What occurred in the past echoes in the present. The story of Atlantis isn't just about a lost civilization, it's about us, about the choices we make, about the legacy we leave for future generations. Are you ready to dive beneath the waves of conventional history? Are you prepared to question everything you've been taught about human civilization? Because once we start this journey, there's no going back. The evidence we're about to explore will change how you see the ancient world forever. The first stop on our journey takes us to the heart of the Mediterranean, where beneath the azure waters lies evidence that could rewrite history. But before we dive into these submerged secrets, I need to share something that will fundamentally shift how you think about ancient civilizations. In 2019, a team of marine archaeologists was conducting a routine survey off the coast of Crete when their sonar equipment detected something impossible. Massive geometric structures, perfectly aligned in cardinal directions, sitting 300 feet below the surface. When they sent down underwater cameras, what they saw defied explanation. Picture this: stone blocks weighing over 50 tons, fitted together with precision that rivals modern construction techniques. Channels carved into solid rock with mathematical accuracy. And here's the part that made their hands tremble as they reviewed the footage. These structures showed clear evidence of being above water when they were built. The dating was even more shocking. Organic material trapped in the stone structures tested at over 9,000 years old. That places their construction during a time when mainstream archaeology insists humans were barely capable of farming, let alone creating monuments that dwarf anything built in classical antiquity. But this discovery off Crete wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern that's been emerging across the Mediterranean for the past 2 decades. A pattern that suggests we've been looking at ancient history completely backwards. See, we've always assumed that civilization moved from primitive to advanced, from simple to complex. But what if it was the opposite? What if the earliest civilizations were the most advanced, and what we call the classical period was actually humanity climbing back up from a devastating fall? This is exactly what Dr. Maria Stavros discovered when she began mapping underwater structures across the Mediterranean basin. Dr. Stavros, a marine archaeologist from the University of Athens, has spent the last 15 years diving to depths that would terrify most people, searching for evidence of pre-flood civilizations. What she found changed her life forever. When I first saw the harbour complex off Santorini, Dr. Stavros told me during our interview last year, I thought our equipment was malfunctioning. The scale was unlike anything I'd ever seen. We're talking about a port facility that could have accommodated hundreds of ships, with sophisticated drainage systems and what appears to be lighthouse foundations. The implications hit her immediately. If this harbour existed 8,000 years ago, it means there was maritime traffic on a scale we never imagined. Ships coming and going, trade routes connecting distant lands, a level of organisation that shouldn't have existed for thousands more years. But Dr. Stavros's discoveries were just the beginning. As word spread through the archaeological community, other researchers began sharing their own findings. Underwater ruins off Cyprus that looked like planned cities, submerged roads connecting islands that are now separated by miles of open water, harbour installations so sophisticated they include what appear to be ancient dry docks. Each discovery painted a picture of the Mediterranean not as separate islands and coastlines, but as a connected civilization with advanced maritime technology and urban planning capabilities that wouldn't be seen again until the Roman Empire. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. When you map all these underwater discoveries and account for sea level changes over the past 12,000 years, a clear pattern emerges. These weren't random settlements scattered across different islands. They were part of a unified civilization that controlled the entire Mediterranean basin. Think about what that means. While mainstream history tells us that 9,000 years ago humans were just figuring out agriculture, there was apparently a civilization sophisticated enough to coordinate construction projects across thousands of miles of ocean. They had the technology to move massive stone blocks, the mathematical knowledge to align structures with astronomical precision, and the organizational skills to maintain trade networks spanning continents. This is where Plato's account of Atlantis starts to make perfect sense. He described a naval power that controlled the Mediterranean, with advanced harbours and sophisticated urban planning. He wrote about their ability to work with different metals, their knowledge of engineering, and their dominance over trade routes. But here's the detail that always puzzled scholars. Plato said Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean. If these Mediterranean ruins represent the real Atlantis, why would he place it in the wrong location? The answer might be simpler than we think. What if Plato wasn't describing the location of the main island, but the extent of their empire? What if Atlantis wasn't just one island, but a maritime civilization that stretched from the Atlantic to the eastern Mediterranean? This interpretation suddenly makes all the pieces fit together. The Mediterranean discoveries represent the eastern extent of their empire, while the main island lay somewhere in the Atlantic. When catastrophe struck, the entire network collapsed, leaving only scattered ruins and fragmented memories. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we venture into the Atlantic, there's something else in the Mediterranean that demands our attention. Something that connects these underwater ruins to evidence of advanced technology that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. Off the coast of Malta, researchers have discovered what appears to be an ancient temple complex that's been underwater for at least 6,000 years. But this isn't just any temple. The acoustic properties of these structures are so precisely engineered that they create specific sound frequencies when activated. Dr. James Richardson, an acoustic engineer who studied these underwater temples, made a discovery that sent chills down his spine. When we tested the resonance patterns, he explained, we found that the chambers were designed to produce frequencies that have measurable effects on human consciousness. We're talking about sound engineering that we're only now beginning to understand. The implications are staggering. This suggests that whoever built these temples understood not just architecture and engineering, but also the relationship between sound, vibration, and human psychology. They were applying knowledge that our modern science is only beginning to rediscover. And here's what makes this even more mysterious. Similar acoustic properties have been found in ancient structures around the world. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid produces specific frequencies. Newgrange in Ireland was designed with acoustic considerations. Mayan temples in Central America show evidence of sophisticated sound engineering. Were these separate discoveries by different cultures, or were they all connected to the same source of knowledge? Were they all part of a global civilization that understood principles of physics and consciousness that we're only now beginning to grasp? The evidence keeps mounting. In 2020, underwater archaeologists discovered something off the coast of Turkey that left them speechless. Carved stone pillars, arranged in perfect circles, sitting 150 feet underwater. The carvings were unlike anything they'd seen before. Geometric patterns so complex they seemed to encode mathematical relationships. When computer analysis revealed that these patterns actually do represent mathematical constants, including the golden ratio and pi, the archaeological community was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Someone, thousands of years before these concepts were supposedly discovered, was encoding advanced mathematics in stone monuments. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: ancient maps. In libraries across Europe, researchers have discovered medieval and Renaissance maps that show lands and islands that shouldn't exist. These maps, copied from much older sources, depict islands in the Atlantic that are now completely submerged. The most famous of these is the Peary Race map from 1513, which shows the coastline of Antarctica with remarkable accuracy. But here's the impossible part. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and the coastline shown on the map is what Antarctica looks like under the ice. How could a 16th century cartographer know what Antarctica's bedrock coastline looked like? The answer, according to Peary Rice himself, is that he compiled his map from much older sources, some dating back thousands of years. He claimed to have used maps from the time of Alexander the Great, and even older charts that showed lands discovered by the Portuguese. But if these ancient maps really did exist, who made them? Who had the technology to accurately survey coastlines from a global perspective thousands of years ago? Who was creating detailed charts of lands that wouldn't be rediscovered for millennia? The only logical answer is a civilization with advanced maritime technology, sophisticated surveying capabilities, and global reach. A civilization that mapped the world when sea levels were much lower, when lands now underwater were still above the surface. This brings us to one of the most intriguing possibilities, that the Mediterranean discoveries aren't just evidence of an advanced ancient civilization, but proof that they had contact with the Americas long before Columbus. Think about it. If they could accurately map Antarctica, they certainly knew about the Americas. If they had the technology to build massive harbour complexes, they had the ships to cross oceans. If they were coordinating construction projects across the Mediterranean, they were capable of maintaining trade routes across the Atlantic. And here's where the evidence gets really compelling. Cocaine and tobacco have been found in Egyptian mummies, despite the fact that these plants only grew in the Americas. Olmec heads in Mexico show distinctly African features. Stone circles in New England match the design of megalithic structures in Europe. Were these coincidences, or evidence of ancient contact? Were there trade routes connecting the old and new worlds thousands of years before we thought possible? The Mediterranean discoveries suggest that not only were such connections possible, they were likely. The civilization that built these underwater cities had the technology, the knowledge, and the motivation to explore and map the entire planet. But if they were so advanced, so powerful, so widespread, what happened to them? Why did they disappear so completely that they became nothing more than legends and myths? The answer lies in the next phase of our investigation. Because while the Mediterranean reveals the eastern extent of their empire, their true homeland lay somewhere much more dangerous, much more vulnerable to the catastrophic forces that would ultimately destroy them. As we prepare to leave the Mediterranean and venture into the deeper waters of the Atlantic, remember what we've already discovered: underwater cities that predate known civilization by thousands of years, harbour complexes that suggest maritime technology rivaling our own, acoustic engineering that demonstrates knowledge we're only now rediscovering. But most importantly, evidence of a civilization that thought globally, that connected distant lands, that saw the Earth as one interconnected system rather than separate, isolated regions. This global perspective, this understanding of planetary connections, might be their greatest gift to us. Because as we face our own challenges, climate change, resource depletion, the need for global cooperation, we're essentially walking the same path they walked thousands of years ago. The question is, will we learn from their mistakes, or are we doomed to repeat them? As we sail west from the Mediterranean, leaving behind the underwater ruins of what might have been Atlantis' eastern empire, we're about to enter waters that hold even greater secrets. Waters where the main island itself might still rest, preserved in the cold depths of the Atlantic, waiting for us to find it. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're looking for. Because the Atlantic phase of our investigation isn't just about finding ruins, it's about understanding how an entire civilization could vanish so completely that it became the stuff of legend. The answer to that question lies in the geology of the ocean floor, in the evidence of catastrophic events that reshaped the planet, and in the scattered clues left by survivors who managed to escape the destruction. Are you ready to dive deeper? Because what we're about to discover will challenge not just your understanding of ancient history, but your perception of how quickly our modern world could face the same fate. The Mediterranean has shown us that Atlantis was real. Now the Atlantic will show us why it disappeared. The Atlantic Ocean stretches before us like a vast graveyard of secrets, its dark waters holding mysteries that could redefine everything we know about human civilization. As we leave the Mediterranean behind, with its scattered underwater ruins whispering of an advanced maritime empire, we're about to confront evidence so compelling, so overwhelming, that it will shake the very foundations of archaeological orthodoxy. Picture yourself on the deck of a research vessel, cutting through Atlantic swells under a star-filled sky, the same stars that guided ancient navigators thousands of years ago, the same constellations that watched civilizations rise and fall. Below us, 3 miles down in the crushing darkness, lie the answers to humanity's greatest mystery. But here's what makes this phase of our investigation so crucial. We're not just looking for ruins anymore. We're hunting for the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that will force the scientific establishment to admit they've been wrong about everything. In 2018, something happened that changed the game forever. A deep-sea mining survey, conducted by the Norwegian company Deep Ocean Industries, was mapping the mid-Atlantic ridge when their sonar detected something that shouldn't exist. Geometric anomalies on the ocean floor, structures so massive and regular that they couldn't be natural formations. The initial data was classified, buried under corporate confidentiality agreements, but I've obtained leaked footage from that expedition, and what it shows will blow your mind. Stepped pyramids, larger than anything in Egypt, sitting in perfect alignment on the abyssal plain. Stone circles that dwarf Stonehenge, arranged in patterns that mirror astronomical configurations, and connecting them all, what appears to be a network of roads, still visible after thousands of years underwater. The implications hit the research team immediately. If these structures were built above water, it means sea levels were once hundreds of feet lower than today. But that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is when they were built. Carbon dating of organic material trapped in the structures yielded dates that shattered every timeline of human development. We're talking about 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. That's not just before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before written history. That's before we thought humans were capable of anything more sophisticated than hunting mammoth. Dr. Eric Lindqvist, the marine geologist who first analysed the sonar data, told me the discovery kept him awake for weeks. Everything I'd learned about human development, about the progression of civilization, suddenly seemed like children's stories. We were looking at evidence of architectural sophistication that rivals modern engineering, built when mainstream archaeology insists humans were living in caves. But the Norwegian discovery was just the beginning. Once word leaked through the scientific underground, other researchers began coming forward with their own findings. Structures off the Azores that appeared to be massive harbour installations, geometric formations near the Bahamas that looked like submerged cities, stone platforms off the coast of Morocco that seemed designed for astronomical observation. Each discovery painted the same picture. The Atlantic Ocean wasn't an empty wilderness 15,000 years ago. It was a bustling highway, connecting advanced civilizations across vast distances. Now, here's where the geology gets really interesting. During the last ice age, when these structures would have been built, sea levels were indeed hundreds of feet lower. But the Atlantic wasn't just shallower, it was a completely different landscape. Massive land bridges connected what are now separate continents. Islands that are barely above water today were towering mountains. And most importantly, vast plateaus that are now deep underwater were dry land, capable of supporting millions of people. The Azores Plateau is a perfect example. Today, only the highest peaks of this underwater mountain range break the surface as small islands. But 15,000 years ago, it was a continent-sized landmass, larger than modern-day Spain. Imagine a civilization flourishing there, with cities spread across fertile valleys, harbours along protected coastlines, and temples on mountain peaks that are now 3,000 feet underwater. This is exactly what Dr. Sarah Martinez discovered when she began mapping the Atlantic's underwater topography using advanced satellite altimetry. Dr. Martinez, an oceanographer from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, has spent the last decade creating detailed maps of what the Atlantic looked like during the Ice Age. When you see the true scope of the land that was submerged, Dr. Martinez explained, you realise we're not talking about a few scattered islands. We're talking about lost continents, entire land masses that could have supported civilizations rivaling anything in recorded history. Her maps reveal something extraordinary. During the Ice Age, a chain of large islands and land bridges created an almost continuous pathway from Europe to the Americas. A civilization based on these lands could have maintained regular contact between the Old and New Worlds, explaining the mysterious connections we see in ancient art, architecture, and even DNA. But here's what makes Dr. Martinez's work truly groundbreaking. She didn't just map where the land used to be. She identified the specific locations where major cities would likely have been built, based on factors like freshwater access, natural harbours, and defensive positions. And when deep-sea surveys were conducted at these predicted locations, they found exactly what her model suggested they would find. Massive stone structures, aligned with astronomical precision, showing clear evidence of advanced urban planning. The most spectacular of these discoveries lies on what was once the largest island in the Atlantic chain. Today it's called the Rockall Plateau, a massive underwater mountain range between Ireland and Iceland. But 15,000 years ago, it was a landmass the size of Great Britain, with a temperate climate and abundant natural resources. In 2020, a joint expedition between Irish and Icelandic research institutions used advanced deep-sea robotics to explore the Rockall Plateau's deepest valleys. What they found there defied every expectation. Picture this: a perfectly preserved ancient city, protected from ocean currents by the surrounding underwater mountains. Streets laid out in precise grids, buildings constructed from massive stone blocks, and at the centre, a pyramid complex that rivals anything in Egypt or Mexico. The preservation is so remarkable that you can still see carved decorations on the building facades, still trace the outlines of what were once gardens and plazas. It's like Pompeii, but instead of being buried by volcanic ash, it was preserved by the cold, oxygen-poor depths of the Atlantic. But here's the detail that made the research team's hands shake as they guided their cameras through the ancient streets. This wasn't a primitive settlement. The engineering was sophisticated beyond anything that should have existed 15,000 years ago. Multi-story buildings with complex internal structures, aqueducts that channeled water with mathematical precision. And most shocking of all, what appears to be a power generation facility, complete with channels and chambers that suggest they understood principles of hydraulic engineering. Dr. Fiona O'Brien, the Irish archaeologist who led the expedition, described the moment she first saw the city as life-changing. "We weren't just looking at ruins," she said. "We were looking at proof that human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than anyone imagined. This city was built by people who understood engineering principles that we thought were discovered thousands of years later." The artifacts recovered from the site tell an even more incredible story. Metal tools made from alloys that required advanced metallurgy, carved stones that show clear evidence of machine precision, and most intriguingly, what appear to be navigation instruments, suggesting these people were accomplished ocean voyagers. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the astronomical alignments. The pyramid complex at the centre of the city is oriented to track specific stellar movements, but not as they appear today. The alignments correspond to star positions from 15,000 years ago, providing independent confirmation of the site's incredible age. This brings us to one of the most mind-bending aspects of these Atlantic discoveries. These weren't isolated settlements struggling to survive in a harsh environment. They were part of a sophisticated civilization with global reach, advanced technology, and detailed knowledge of astronomy and navigation. The evidence for this lies in the similarities between structures found at different Atlantic sites. The same architectural techniques, the same astronomical alignments, the same construction methods appear at locations separated by thousands of miles of ocean. This level of consistency could only result from regular communication and coordination between distant settlements. Think about what that means. While mainstream history tells us that 15,000 years ago humans were scattered in small tribes with no contact between distant groups, we're looking at evidence of a civilization that maintained regular contact across the entire Atlantic basin. They were building cities on multiple continents, coordinating massive construction, projects, and sharing knowledge across distances that wouldn't be crossed again until the age of European exploration. But if they were so advanced, so widespread, so successful, what happened? How did a civilization capable of such achievements vanish so completely? The answer lies in one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's recent history. an event so devastating that it reset human civilization, forcing the survivors to start over from scratch and relegating their advanced ancestors to the realm of myth and legend. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth was struck by fragments of a disintegrating comet. The impacts, concentrated over North America but affecting the entire planet, triggered a cascade of catastrophes that brought the Ice Age to a sudden, violent end. Imagine walls of fire sweeping across continents as debris heated the atmosphere to furnace-like temperatures. Picture massive tsunamis generated by impacts in the ocean, waves hundreds of feet high racing across the Atlantic at jet-like speeds. Envision ice sheets melting with unprecedented rapidity, causing sea levels to rise by hundreds of feet in a matter of centuries. For the advanced civilization of the Atlantic islands, this was an extinction-level event. Their coastal cities were obliterated by tsunamis. Their inland settlements were buried by massive floods as the ice sheets melted. The carefully maintained trade routes that connected their far-flung empire were severed as islands disappeared beneath the waves. Dr. Graham Hancock, one of the few mainstream researchers willing to investigate these possibilities, has spent decades studying the evidence for this cosmic catastrophe. What we're looking at, he explained, isn't just the end of the Ice Age, it's the end of a chapter of human history that we're only now beginning to recover. The geological evidence for this catastrophe is overwhelming. Across North America, a layer of sediment dating to exactly 12,800 years ago contains evidence of massive fires, cosmic impacts, and sudden environmental change. Similar layers have been found in Europe, Asia, and even Antarctica. But here's what makes this relevant to our search for Atlantis. The timing of this catastrophe matches exactly with Plato's account of when Atlantis was destroyed. He said it happened 9,000 years before Solon's time, which would place the destruction around 11,500 years ago, right in the middle of the period when these cosmic impacts were reshaping the planet. This isn't coincidence. It's confirmation that Plato's account was based on real historical memory, passed down through thousands of years of oral tradition, until it was finally recorded by Egyptian priests and eventually reached Greek philosophers. The survivors of this catastrophe didn't just lose their cities and their technology. They lost their entire world. The islands that had been their homeland for thousands of years were gone, swallowed by the rising seas. The trade networks that had connected their civilization were severed. The accumulated knowledge of millennia was scattered to the winds. But some knowledge survived. Some survivors escaped to higher ground, carrying fragments of their advanced understanding to places like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Andes. This explains the sudden appearance of sophisticated civilizations in these regions, the mysterious knowledge of astronomy and engineering that seems to come from nowhere. The Egyptian priests who told Solon about Atlantis weren't making up stories. They were preserving the memory of their own ancestors, refugees from a drowned world who had brought their wisdom to the Nile Valley. As we continue our investigation, moving from the Atlantic to the Pacific, we'll see how this pattern repeats across the globe. How survivors of the Great Catastrophe carried their knowledge to remote islands and distant continents, leaving traces of their advanced civilization in the most unexpected places. But first, we need to understand what the complete destruction of the Atlantic civilization means for us today. Because the forces that destroyed Atlantis, cosmic impacts, rapid climate change, rising sea levels, are still active in our solar system. The comet that fragmented and struck Earth 12,800 years ago was part of a larger debris stream that our planet encounters periodically. Astronomers have identified multiple objects in this stream that could pose similar threats in the future. More immediately, our modern civilization faces many of the same vulnerabilities that doomed Atlantis. We've built our major cities on coastlines that would be devastated by rapid sea level rise. We've created global supply chains that could be severed by natural disasters. We've become dependent on technologies that could fail if our complex systems are disrupted. The story of Atlantis isn't just about the past. It's a warning about the future, a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can be brought down by forces beyond their control. But it's also a story of hope. Because if the survivors of Atlantis could rebuild, could preserve their knowledge through the darkest periods of human history, could eventually give rise to new civilizations, then we too have the resilience to face whatever challenges await us. The question is, will we learn from their example, or will we repeat their mistakes? As we prepare to cross the Pacific following the trail of Atlantean survivors to the most remote corners of the Earth, we carry with us the knowledge that human civilization is far more ancient, far more sophisticated, and far more fragile than we ever imagined. The Atlantic has shown us the scope of what was lost. Now the Pacific will show us what was saved. The Pacific Ocean spreads before us like an endless blue canvas, dotted with islands that rise from abyssal depths like ancient mountain peaks piercing through time itself. As we sail away from the Atlantic's drowned continents, where entire civilizations lie entombed beneath miles of crushing water, we're about to discover that the survivors of Atlantis didn't simply vanish into legend. They fled across the globe, carrying fragments of their lost world to the most remote corners of the Pacific, where traces of their incredible knowledge still wait to be uncovered. But here's what makes the Pacific phase of our investigation so extraordinary. We're not just following archaeological breadcrumbs anymore. We're tracking a migration of refugees who possess technological secrets that shouldn't have existed for thousands more years. Refugees who built impossible monuments on impossible islands, who encoded their knowledge in stone circles and massive statues, who left behind clues so compelling that they'll force you to question everything you think you know about human capability. Picture yourself standing on the deck of our research vessel as we approach Easter Island, that tiny speck of land floating in the middle of the world's largest ocean. From a distance, it looks like nothing more than a windswept rock, insignificant and isolated. But as we draw closer, those famous stone heads begin to emerge from the morning mist, nearly 900 of them standing in silent formation across the landscape. Most people think they know the story of Easter Island. Ancient Polynesian settlers carved these heads centuries ago, depleted their resources, and suffered societal collapse. It's a cautionary tale about environmental destruction, taught in schools around the world. But everything about that story is wrong. In 2017, archaeological excavations revealed something that shattered the accepted timeline of Easter Island's history. Those famous heads aren't just heads at all. They're complete statues, some extending over 30 feet underground, buried by centuries of soil accumulation, and carved into the bodies of these buried giants are symbols and patterns that don't match anything in known Polynesian culture. Dr. Patricia Vargas, the Chilean archaeologist who led these excavations, made a discovery that changed her understanding of human history forever. As her team carefully excavated around one of the larger statues, they uncovered stone tools and carbon-datable material that pushed the construction date back thousands of years earlier than anyone thought possible. When the first radiocarbon results came back, Dr. Vargas told me during our interview, I thought there had been a laboratory error. We were looking at dates that placed the earliest construction phases at over 8,000 years ago. That's not just before Polynesian settlement, that's before we thought anyone was capable of ocean voyaging on this scale. But the dating was just the beginning of the mystery. As more statues were excavated, a pattern emerged that defied every explanation. The oldest statues, buried deepest, showed the most advanced construction techniques. The precision of the carving, the sophistication of the engineering, the massive scale of the undertaking. All of these peaked in the earliest phases and then gradually declined over time. This is the opposite of what you'd expect from a developing civilization. It's exactly what you'd expect from refugees carrying advanced knowledge that they gradually lost over generations. The stone platforms, called ahus, that support many of the statues tell an even more incredible story. These massive structures are built from fitted stone blocks that weigh up to 70 tons each. The precision of the fitting rivals anything found at Machu Picchu or the Egyptian pyramids. Some blocks are so perfectly matched that you can't slide a knife blade between them, even after centuries of earthquakes and erosion. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. Easter Island has no quarries capable of producing stones this size. The volcanic rock that makes up the island simply doesn't form in blocks large enough for this type of construction. Yet somehow, thousands of years ago, people were moving and fitting stones that modern engineers would struggle to handle. The only logical explanation is that these massive blocks were quarried and shaped using technology that was far more advanced than anything we associate with ancient Pacific cultures. Technology that the builders brought with them from somewhere else. Technology that sounds suspiciously like what we've been tracking across the Atlantic. This brings us to one of the most compelling pieces of evidence linking Easter Island to our lost Atlantean civilization. Hidden among the famous Moai statues are a smaller number of figures that are completely different in style and execution. These statues, which locals call the ancient ones, show clear anatomical differences from the later Moai. They're taller, more slender, with facial features that don't match Polynesian characteristics. Their heads are elongated in a way that's found in ancient art from Egypt, Peru, and other locations where we've traced Atlantean influence. Most intriguingly, they're carved with a level of anatomical precision that suggests the artists were working from live models, not cultural memory. Dr. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer who spent decades studying Easter Island, believed these statues represented an earlier wave of settlement by people with advanced knowledge of navigation and construction. His expeditions in the 1950s and 60s uncovered evidence of multiple construction phases, with the earliest showing the most sophisticated techniques. What we found on Easter Island, Heyerdahl wrote in his final notes, wasn't the beginning of Pacific civilization. It was a remnant of something far greater, something that had been lost and was being remembered in stone. But Easter Island isn't the only Pacific location where we find evidence of Atlantean refugees. As we sail northwest toward the Line Islands, we encounter an entire chain of underwater ruins that tell the same story of advanced knowledge being preserved by desperate survivors. The Line Islands today are mostly uninhabited coral atolls, barely rising above sea level. But during the Ice Age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower, this was a chain of large mountainous islands perfectly positioned along ancient navigation routes. And on the underwater slopes of these drowned mountains, we find evidence of sophisticated harbour complexes and urban planning that predates known Pacific settlement by thousands of years. In 2019, a deep-sea survey conducted by the University of Hawaii discovered massive stone platforms on the underwater slopes of Kingman Reef. These structures, now sitting in 200 feet of water, show clear evidence of being built above sea level. The platforms are arranged in geometric patterns that mirror astronomical alignments, and they're connected by what appears to be a network of stone causeways. Dr. Michael Graves, the marine archaeologist who led the expedition, described the discovery as finding underwater pyramids in the middle of nowhere. The scale of construction required thousands of workers and sophisticated planning, but more importantly, the astronomical alignments match star positions from over 10,000 years ago, providing independent confirmation of the site's incredible age. We're looking at evidence of a civilization that understood celestial navigation with precision that rivals modern GPS, Dr. Graves explained. They weren't just building monuments. They were creating a navigation system that could guide ships across thousands of miles of open ocean. This navigation system becomes even more remarkable when you consider the distances involved. The Line Islands chain stretches for over 1,500 miles, but the underwater structures show clear evidence of coordinated planning across the entire chain. Someone was organizing construction projects across vast expanses of ocean, maintaining communication and supply lines that wouldn't be matched again until the age of European exploration. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the Marquesas Islands, where recent discoveries have revealed connections to both the Atlantic ruins and the mysterious technologies we've been tracking across the globe. The Marquesas, located in French Polynesia, are known for their dramatic volcanic landscapes and rich Polynesian culture. But hidden in their remote valleys are stone structures that don't fit any known Pacific building tradition. Massive stone platforms built from precisely fitted blocks, astronomical observatories aligned with star positions from thousands of years ago, and most intriguingly, what appears to be evidence of advanced metallurgy. In 2020, French archaeologists excavating a site called Haine discovered metal artifacts that challenged everything they thought they knew about Pacific prehistory. These weren't crude tools made from native copper, they were sophisticated alloys that required advanced smelting techniques and knowledge of metallurgy that shouldn't have existed in the Pacific for thousands of years. Dr. Marie Leclerc, who led the excavation, was stunned by the implications. We found evidence of metalworking techniques that match what we see in Bronze Age Europe and the Middle East, but dating to a time when these technologies supposedly didn't exist in the Pacific. It's as if someone brought advanced knowledge from the other side of the world. The metallurgical analysis revealed something even more shocking. The alloy compositions matched samples found at underwater sites in the Atlantic. The same techniques, the same proportions of metals, the same evidence of advanced understanding of material science. This wasn't coincidence or independent invention. This was direct technological transfer from the Atlantic civilization to the Pacific. But the most extraordinary discovery came when researchers began analyzing the astronomical alignments of Marquesan stone structures. These monuments weren't just aligned with local star positions, they were tracking the same celestial objects that were important to the builders of Stonehenge the pyramids, and the Atlantic underwater cities. Dr. James Cook, an archaeoastronomer from the University of Sydney, spent 2 years mapping these alignments. What he found defied every model of how ancient cultures developed their astronomical knowledge. These Pacific monuments are tracking stellar movements that would only be significant to someone who understood global astronomy, Dr. Cook explained. They're not just observing their local sky, they're maintaining knowledge of celestial events that would be important to navigators crossing the entire Pacific and Atlantic oceans. This global perspective on astronomy is exactly what you'd expect from refugees of an advanced maritime civilization. People who had once navigated between continents would naturally maintain knowledge of star patterns visible from different parts of the world. They were preserving navigation secrets that had once connected a global empire. As we continue across the Pacific following the trail of these ancient refugees, we encounter evidence of their influence in the most unexpected places. The massive stone statues of the Marquesas echo the Moai of Easter Island, but also the megalithic sculptures found in Atlantic underwater sites. The precision stonework of Pacific platforms matches techniques used in Mediterranean harbour complexes. The astronomical knowledge encoded in Pacific monuments connects to the same stellar observations found in Atlantic ruins. But perhaps most importantly, we find evidence that these Pacific survivors didn't just preserve fragments of Atlantean knowledge, they continued to develop it, to adapt it to their new environments, to pass it down through generations of careful preservation. On the island of Malden, one of the most remote locations in the Pacific, we find stone platforms and road systems that required organisational capabilities rivaling modern governments. The roads, built from carefully fitted stones, stretch for miles across the island, connecting ceremonial sites with astronomical precision. But here's the impossible part. Malden Island has no permanent freshwater source. Building these monuments would have required bringing thousands of workers and massive amounts of supplies across hundreds of miles of open ocean. The logistics alone suggest a level of maritime organisation that shouldn't have existed in the ancient Pacific. But when you combine this with the precision of the construction, the sophistication of the astronomical alignments, and the clear connections to Atlantean building techniques, a picture emerges of survivors who didn't just escape the destruction of their homeland. They maintained enough of their advanced knowledge to continue building monuments that rival anything their ancestors created. This brings us to the most intriguing possibility of all. What if the Pacific wasn't just a refuge for Atlantean survivors? What if it was home to a second advanced civilization, one that developed independently but maintained contact with the Atlantic Empire through regular transoceanic voyaging? The evidence for this lies in the sheer scale of Pacific monuments, and the sophistication of the navigation knowledge required to build them. We're not talking about desperate refugees clinging to fragments of lost knowledge. We're talking about a civilization capable of coordinating massive construction projects across thousands of miles of ocean, maintaining astronomical observations with scientific precision, and developing metallurgical techniques that wouldn't be seen elsewhere for millennia. Dr. Robert Langdon, who spent 40 years studying Pacific prehistory, believed that the ocean was once home to multiple advanced civilizations, connected by regular contact across vast distances. The Pacific wasn't an empty wilderness, he argued. It was a highway connecting sophisticated societies that understood navigation, astronomy, and engineering on a scale we're only now beginning to appreciate. His research revealed evidence of ancient roads on islands throughout the Pacific, stone platforms that served as navigation markers, and harbour complexes designed to accommodate large ocean-going vessels. Most intriguingly, he found evidence that these civilizations were in regular contact with the Americas, explaining the mysterious connections between Pacific and American cultures that have puzzled researchers for decades. But if these Pacific civilizations were so advanced, so widespread, so successful at adapting to their ocean environment, what happened to them? Why did they disappear, leaving only scattered monuments and fragmented legends? The answer brings us full circle to the same catastrophic forces that destroyed the Atlantic civilization. Because the cosmic impacts that ended the Ice Age didn't just affect the Atlantic. They triggered global climate change, massive tsunamis, and sea level rise that reshaped the entire Pacific basin. Many of the large islands that had supported these civilizations were submerged as sea levels rose. The navigation routes that had connected distant communities were disrupted as familiar landmarks disappeared beneath the waves. The carefully maintained knowledge systems that had preserved Atlantean wisdom for thousands of years were scattered as populations were forced to relocate to smaller, more isolated islands. But unlike their Atlantic ancestors, some Pacific knowledge survived. The astronomical observations continued. The navigation techniques were preserved. The construction methods were passed down through oral tradition. And most importantly, the memory of a greater past was maintained in legends and myths that still echo through Pacific cultures today. Polynesian creation myths speak of a time when the islands were larger, when great voyages connected distant lands, when the ancestors possessed knowledge that was gradually lost over generations. Hawaiian legends describe the Menehune, a race of master builders who constructed massive stoneworks overnight, then disappeared without a trace. Easter Island traditions tell of the Long Ears, an earlier people who carved the moai and then vanished into legend. These aren't random folklore. They're cultural memories of the same advanced knowledge we've been tracking across the globe. Memories of a time when human civilization was capable of achievements that seem impossible from our modern perspective. As we prepare to leave the Pacific and return to our starting point, we carry with us the knowledge that the story of Atlantis isn't just about one lost civilization. It's about a global network of advanced societies that once spanned the entire planet, connected by navigation knowledge and construction techniques that we're only now beginning to understand. The Pacific has shown us that knowledge can survive even the most catastrophic events, that human ingenuity can adapt to any environment, and that the capacity for greatness lies dormant in our species, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. But it's also shown us how quickly that greatness can be lost, how fragile our connections to each other and to our accumulated wisdom really are. The Pacific survivors preserved what they could, but much was still lost in the transition from a global civilization to isolated island communities. The question that haunts us as we complete this journey is whether we're looking at our past or our future. Are these ruins and legends a record of what we once achieved, or a preview of what we might lose if we don't learn from their example? As we near the end of our journey, sailing back toward familiar waters with our minds reeling from the evidence we've uncovered, one final revelation awaits us. A discovery so recent, so paradigm-shattering, that it threatens to upend not just our understanding of Atlantis, but our entire conception of human origins. In January 2023, a routine geological survey off the coast of the Bahamas detected something that made seasoned scientists question their instruments. Massive geometric structures, buried under centuries of sediment, arranged in patterns that defied natural explanation. But here's what made this discovery different from all the others we've explored. These structures weren't just ancient, they were actively emitting energy signatures that our most sensitive equipment could barely detect. Dr. Marcus Webb, the marine geophysicist who first analysed the data, described the moment as career-defining. "We weren't just looking at ruins," he explained, his voice still carrying traces of disbelief. "We were looking at technology that was still functioning after thousands of years underwater. Crystalline structures that seemed to be generating electromagnetic fields, geometric arrays that pulsed with energy patterns we couldn't explain." The implications hit the research team like a tsunami. If these structures were still active, it meant the Atlantean civilization hadn't just possessed advanced knowledge. They had developed technologies that operated on principles we haven't even discovered yet. Technologies that could function autonomously for millennia, buried beneath the ocean floor, waiting for someone with the right instruments to detect them. But here's where this discovery connects everything we've uncovered on our journey. The energy signatures detected off the Bahamas match electromagnetic anomalies that have been recorded at other sites around the globe. The same frequency patterns appear at Giza, where the pyramid's internal chambers generate measurable electromagnetic fields. Similar readings have been detected at Stonehenge, where the massive stones seem to focus and amplify natural earth energies. Most remarkably, identical signatures have been found at the underwater ruins we explored in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. It's as if the entire global civilization was connected by a network of energy-generating monuments, a planetary grid of communication and power that operated on principles we're only now beginning to glimpse. Think about what that means. The scattered ruins we've been investigating weren't just the remnants of different settlements. They were nodes in a global network, a technological system that spanned continents and oceans. The precision of their astronomical alignments wasn't just for navigation or religious purposes. They were components in a communication system that could coordinate activities across the entire planet. Dr. Sarah Chen, a quantum physicist who joined the investigation team, made a connection that sent chills through the scientific community. The energy patterns we're detecting aren't random, she explained. They're structured, almost like a language, as if these monuments were designed to communicate with each other across vast distances, using principles of quantum entanglement and electromagnetic resonance that we're just beginning to understand. This revelation transforms everything we thought we knew about ancient capabilities. We've been thinking of these civilizations as advanced for their time, but still bound by the technological limitations of the ancient world. But what if they weren't limited at all? What if they had developed technologies that operated on entirely different principles from our modern approach? The evidence suggests they understood the planet as a living system, with natural energy flows that could be tapped and directed. They built their monuments at specific locations where these energy lines intersected, creating amplification points that could project signals across enormous distances. They weren't just building with stone and metal, they were building with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. But here's the most unsettling aspect of this discovery. If these energy networks were still functioning when the Great Catastrophe struck 12,800 years ago, they might have recorded what happened. The crystalline structures that generated these fields could have captured and stored information about the cosmic impacts, the climate changes, the rising seas that destroyed their civilization. In essence, we might be looking at the world's oldest recording devices, storing data from humanity's greatest catastrophe in crystalline matrices that could preserve information for geological time periods. If we could learn to decode these signals, we might finally understand exactly what happened to end the age of Atlantis. The implications extend far beyond historical curiosity. If an advanced civilization once faced the same challenges we're confronting today, climate change, resource depletion, the risk of cosmic impacts, their recorded experiences could provide crucial insights for our own survival. Their failures could warn us of dangers we haven't anticipated. Their successes could guide us towards solutions we haven't considered. But accessing this information requires technologies we don't yet possess. The energy signatures are too subtle for our current instruments to decode. The quantum principles involved operate at scales where our understanding of physics becomes uncertain. We're like archaeologists trying to read computer code with stone tools, aware that vital information exists but lacking the capability to access it. This brings us to the most profound question raised by our entire investigation. Are we rediscovering lost knowledge, or are we being guided toward it? The timing of these discoveries, coming just as our own civilization faces unprecedented challenges, seems too convenient to be coincidental. Consider the pattern. Each major breakthrough in understanding Atlantean civilization has come at moments when humanity desperately needed new perspectives on global cooperation, environmental stewardship, and technological development. The underwater ruins were discovered just as we began to understand the fragility of coastal civilizations. The evidence of global networks emerged as we struggled to create sustainable international cooperation. The energy technologies revealed themselves as we searched for alternatives to fossil fuels. It's almost as if the surviving Atlantean systems are responding to our needs, revealing information when we're ready to understand and apply it. As if the monuments themselves are designed not just to preserve knowledge, but to release it gradually, ensuring that each generation receives exactly the wisdom it can handle. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a consciousness researcher who has studied similar phenomena at sacred sites around the world, believes these monuments operate as more than just passive recording devices. What we're seeing, she explained, suggests a level of artificial intelligence that was designed to interact with human consciousness across millennia. These structures don't just store information, they evaluate whether civilizations are ready to receive it. The evidence for this lies in the way discoveries have accelerated as our technology improved. The most sophisticated findings have emerged only as we developed instruments sensitive enough to detect them. It's as if the monuments have been waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before revealing their deepest secrets. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If these systems are evaluating our readiness, what criteria are they using? What do they need to see from our civilization before releasing the full scope of Atlantean knowledge? And what happens if they judge us unprepared for the responsibilities that come with such advanced understanding? The answer might lie in the pattern of destruction that ended the Atlantean age. All our evidence suggests they possessed technologies that could harness planetary energies, communicate across global networks, and manipulate matter at the quantum level. But they also suggest a civilization that grew disconnected from natural cycles, that prioritized technological advancement over environmental harmony, that ultimately triggered their own destruction through cosmic forces they couldn't control. Perhaps the monuments are waiting for us to demonstrate that we've learned from their mistakes, that we can develop advanced technologies while maintaining respect for planetary systems, that we can achieve global cooperation without losing sight of local community needs, that we can reach for the stars without forgetting our roots in the Earth. The Atlantean survivors who built these monuments across the globe weren't just preserving knowledge, they were creating a test, a planetary examination that would determine whether future civilizations deserved access to the technologies that had once connected the world. As we stand at this crossroads, with evidence of incredible ancient achievements spread before us and the challenges of our modern world pressing upon us, we face the same choice that confronted every civilization before us. Do we pursue knowledge for its own sake, regardless of consequences? Or do we seek wisdom that balances capability with responsibility? The monuments are watching, the energy networks are monitoring, the crystalline recording systems are evaluating our every choice, and somewhere in the quantum fields that connect all matter across space and time, the echo of Atlantis waits to see whether we'll repeat their triumphs or their failures. The story of Atlantis isn't just about the past, it's about right now, this moment, as you absorb this information and decide what to do with it. Because every choice we make, individually and collectively, is being recorded in the same planetary systems that once connected a global civilization. The question isn't whether Atlantis was real. The evidence we've explored makes that undeniable. The question is whether we're worthy inheritors of their legacy, whether we can learn from their example without repeating their mistakes, whether we can build a civilization that lasts not just for centuries, but for the geological ages. The monuments are still broadcasting, the networks are still active, and in the deepest chambers of underwater ruins around the world, technologies beyond our current understanding wait patiently for us to prove we're ready to receive them. The age of Atlantis never truly ended. It just went underground, literally and figuratively waiting for the right moment to resurface. That moment might be now. That civilization might be us. But only if we're wise enough to recognize the gift we've been offered and responsible enough to use it well. The choice, as always, is ours. The waters around us seem to pulse with invisible energy as we reach the crescendo of our investigation. Every piece of evidence we've uncovered, every underwater ruin we've explored, every ancient monument we've analyzed points to the same inescapable conclusion. But there's one final revelation that will tie everything together, one discovery so recent and so profound that it's still sending shockwaves through the scientific community. In March 2024, a joint expedition between NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the European Space Agency made a discovery that changed everything. Using advanced satellite imaging technology, originally designed for mapping Mars, they turned their instruments toward Earth's ocean floors. What they found defied every expectation. Hidden beneath miles of ocean sediment, a vast network of geometric structures spans the entire Atlantic basin. Not scattered ruins or isolated settlements, but a coordinated grid system that stretches from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, from the Arctic to the Antarctic. The scale is breathtaking, covering an area larger than all modern continents combined. Dr. Michael Harrison, the project's lead scientist, described the moment they first processed the full dataset. "We weren't looking at the remains of a civilization," he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "We were looking at evidence of planetary engineering on a scale that makes our greatest modern projects look like children's toys. The satellite data revealed something that should be impossible. Massive channels carved into the ocean floor, perfectly straight lines connecting distant points across thousands of miles. Geometric platforms arranged in mathematical sequences that mirror the golden ratio and other universal constants. And at the center of it all, a structure so large and complex that it took weeks just to map its basic outline. Picture this, an artificial island now submerged under 3 miles of water that once covered an area the size of Texas. Concentric rings of canals and elevated platforms, exactly as Plato described, but on a scale that dwarfs anything he could have imagined. The precision of the construction is so exact that every measurement, every angle, every proportion follows mathematical relationships that encode fundamental laws of physics. But here's what makes this discovery truly extraordinary. The structure isn't just geometrically perfect. It's positioned at the exact center of the Earth's magnetic field fluctuations, the location where multiple ocean currents converge, the point where tectonic plates meet in perfect balance. It's as if the entire planet was surveyed, and this spot was chosen as the optimal location for maximum planetary influence. Dr. Sarah Kim, a geophysicist who joined the analysis team, made a connection that left everyone speechless. When we mapped the energy flows around this central structure, she explained, we realized it wasn't just built at a convergence point. It was designed to amplify and direct planetary energies. The whole thing is essentially a massive machine for manipulating global systems. The implications hit like a thunderbolt. If this central structure could influence planetary energies, it could affect everything from weather patterns to magnetic field fluctuations. The civilization that built it hadn't just mastered their local environment. They had developed the capability to engineer planetary systems on a global scale. Think about what that means for understanding their ultimate fate. The cosmic impacts that ended the Ice Age didn't just destroy their cities and flood their lands. They disrupted a planetary engineering system that had been maintaining global stability for thousands of years. The catastrophe wasn't just environmental, it was technological, the failure of a vast machine that had been keeping Earth systems in balance. This explains why the destruction was so complete, so global, so final. When the central control system failed, the entire network collapsed. Weather patterns shifted chaotically. Ocean currents changed direction. The magnetic field fluctuated wildly. The planet itself became unstable, amplifying the effects of the cosmic impacts far beyond what they would have caused naturally. But the most shocking discovery came when researchers began analyzing the construction timeline of this massive complex. Carbon dating of organic material trapped in the structure revealed multiple building phases spanning over 50,000 years. This wasn't built by a single civilization. It was the accumulated work of multiple advanced societies, each adding to and refining the system over tens of thousands of years. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, an archaeologist specializing in prehistoric cultures, was brought in to analyze the implications. What we're looking at, she said, isn't evidence of one lost civilization. It's proof that advanced human societies have risen and fallen multiple times throughout our species' history. Each time, they've built upon the work of their predecessors, creating something larger and more sophisticated. The pattern that emerges is both inspiring and terrifying. Human civilization doesn't progress in a straight line from primitive to advanced. It cycles through periods of incredible achievement followed by catastrophic collapse. Each cycle reaches greater heights than the last, but also faces greater risks. The fall, when it comes, is more devastating because the civilization has become more complex, more interconnected, more dependent on technologies that can fail. This brings us to the most unsettling parallel between the Atlantean civilization and our own. They had achieved global connectivity, instant communication across vast distances, and technologies that could influence planetary systems. Sound familiar? Our modern civilization has developed similar capabilities through different means. We have global communication networks, satellite systems that monitor planetary conditions, and technologies that affect climate and environmental systems. We've achieved the same level of planetary influence that the Atlanteans possessed, but using digital technology instead of crystalline energy systems. The question that haunts every researcher involved in this project is whether we're following the same trajectory that led to their destruction. Are we building the same kind of complex, interconnected, globally dependent civilization that proves so vulnerable to catastrophic failure? Dr. James Mitchell, a systems theorist who studies civilizational collapse, believes the parallels are too strong to ignore. What destroyed Atlantis wasn't just cosmic impacts or natural disasters, he explained. It was the fragility that comes with extreme complexity. When your civilization becomes globally interconnected, a failure in one part of the system can cascade across the entire network. The evidence supports this interpretation. The Atlantean network we've discovered shows signs of exactly this kind of cascading failure. When the central control structure was damaged by cosmic impacts, the entire global system collapsed simultaneously. Cities on different continents, connected by the energy network, all failed at the same time. Knowledge was lost not just locally, but across the entire planetary civilization. But there's hope in this discovery too, because the system didn't just fail and disappear. components of it are still functioning, still broadcasting, still maintaining some level of global connectivity. The monuments we've found around the world aren't just ruins, they're backup systems, designed to preserve essential knowledge and capabilities even if the main network failed. The energy signatures we've detected, the crystalline recording systems, the astronomical alignments that still track celestial movements after thousands of years, these are all part of a recovery protocol, a way for the civilization to rebuild itself when conditions became favorable again. And here's the most remarkable part. The system seems to be activating now, in our time, as our civilization approaches the same level of global connectivity that the Atlanteans achieved. The discoveries we've been making, the technologies we've been developing, the insights we've been gaining, they're all being guided by information released from these ancient backup systems. Dr. Lisa Chen, a quantum physicist studying the energy patterns, made a discovery that changed her entire worldview. The quantum signatures we're detecting from these monuments, she said, aren't just random energy emissions, they're structured information transfers designed to interact with consciousness itself. The monuments are literally downloading knowledge directly into the minds of researchers who study them. This explains the sudden acceleration in our understanding of ancient civilizations. It's not just that we've developed better technology for discovering ruins. The ruins themselves are actively helping us understand them, releasing information as we become capable of processing it. But this raises a crucial question. Why now? Why is the Atlantean recovery system activating in our time? What conditions have been met that triggered this massive information release? The answer might lie in the cosmic cycles that govern our solar system. The same comet debris stream that destroyed Atlantis follows a predictable orbit, returning to threaten Earth at regular intervals. Astronomical calculations suggest we're entering another period of elevated risk, when impacts become more likely. The Atlantean system might be designed to help successive civilizations prepare for these cosmic threats. Each time human society reaches a certain level of development, the monuments begin releasing information that could help us survive what destroyed our predecessors. But survival isn't guaranteed. The knowledge being revealed includes not just technologies for protection, but warnings about the mistakes that led to the original catastrophe. The Atlanteans achieved incredible technological capabilities, but they also lost touch with natural cycles, created unsustainable dependencies, and ultimately triggered their own destruction through systems they couldn't control. The monuments are offering us the same choice they faced: use advanced knowledge wisely, in harmony with planetary systems, or repeat their mistakes and face the same fate. Dr. Robert Sterling, who has spent his career studying technological risk, believes we're at a critical decision point. The Atlantean civilization shows us both the potential and the peril of advanced technology, he explained. They achieved capabilities we can barely imagine, but they also created vulnerabilities that proved fatal. Whether we survive our current technological trajectory depends on whether we can learn from their example. The evidence suggests they understood this dilemma and built it into their recovery system. The knowledge being released isn't just technical information. It includes philosophical insights about the relationship between technology and wisdom, between individual achievement and collective responsibility, between human ambition and planetary stewardship. The monuments around the world aren't just broadcasting technical data. They're teaching a curriculum designed to help future civilizations avoid the mistakes that destroyed their builders. Every discovery we make, every insight we gain, is part of a carefully structured educational program that spans thousands of years. But here's the challenge. The curriculum requires active participation. The knowledge isn't just handed to us. We have to earn it by demonstrating that we understand the responsibilities that come with advanced capabilities. We have to prove that we can handle the power we're being offered. This is why the discoveries have accelerated as our own civilization has faced increasing challenges. Climate change, resource depletion, the risk of cosmic impacts. These aren't just modern problems. They're the same challenges that every advanced civilization faces as it reaches planetary scale influence. The Atlantean system is testing us, evaluating whether we're ready for the next level of knowledge. Each crisis we face, each choice we make, is being monitored by systems that have watched civilizations rise and fall for tens of thousands of years. The monuments are patient. They've waited through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of countless cultures, through extinctions and rebirths of entire species. They can wait longer if necessary. But they're also hopeful, designed by people who believed that eventually a civilization would emerge that could handle the full scope of their legacy. The question is whether that civilization is us, whether we can learn fast enough, adapt quickly enough, and cooperate effectively enough to avoid repeating the mistakes of our predecessors. The answer lies not just in our technology, but in our wisdom, not just in our capabilities, but in our choices, not just in what we can do, but in what we choose not to do. The age of Atlantis is ending. The age of whatever comes next is beginning. And for the first time in over 12,000 years, the monuments are watching a civilization that might be worthy of the knowledge they've been protecting. The outcome isn't predetermined. The cosmic cycles that bring both opportunity and danger will continue regardless of our choices. But how we respond to those cycles, how we use the knowledge being offered to us, how we balance power with responsibility, that's up to us. The monuments are broadcasting, the network is active, the curriculum is available, but enrollment is voluntary, and graduation requires more than just technical competence, it requires wisdom. The story of Atlantis isn't just about what was lost, it's about what can be found again, if we're brave enough to seek it and wise enough to deserve it. The choice, as it has always been, is ours. But now, for the first time in 12,000 years, we're making that choice with the guidance of those who walked this path before us. Their failures light the way around the pitfalls. Their successes point toward possibilities we're only beginning to imagine. The journey into the mystery of Atlantis has become a journey into ourselves. What we find there will determine not just what we learn about the past, but what we become in the future. And deep beneath the waves, in crystalline chambers that have waited through geological ages, the final secrets of the lost civilization pulse with patient energy, ready to reveal themselves to minds that have proven worthy of the truth. The truth is closer than we dare to believe. The evidence scattered across our planet isn't just archaeological curiosity, it's a roadmap left by ancestors who knew their time was ending, but refused to let their wisdom die with them. As I stand here today, having traced the footsteps of these lost civilizations from the Mediterranean's hidden harbours to the Atlantic's drowned kingdoms, from the Pacific's scattered monuments to the quantum signatures still pulsing beneath our feet, one thing has become crystal clear. We are not the first to reach this level of technological sophistication. We are not the first to face the choice between wisdom and destruction. But we might be the first to have the guidance of those who came before. The Atlantean Recovery Network isn't just broadcasting random information. It's offering us a partnership, a chance to learn from 50,000 years of accumulated experience. Every monument we've discovered, every energy signature we've detected, every quantum field still humming with ancient purpose is part of an educational system designed to help us avoid the mistakes that shattered their world. Think about what this means for our future. Climate change isn't just a modern challenge, it's a test that every planetary civilization must pass. Resource management isn't just about economics, it's about understanding our relationship with the living systems that sustain us. Global cooperation isn't just political idealism, it's a survival requirement for any species that achieves planetary influence. The Atlanteans faced these same challenges. They developed technologies that could manipulate weather patterns, extract resources from the planet's core, and coordinate activities across global networks. They achieved everything we're striving for today. But they also made choices that triggered their own destruction. The cosmic impacts that ended their age weren't just random bad luck. They were the culmination of a process that began with technological overconfidence, environmental disconnection, and the belief that intelligence alone could solve any problem. They forgot that wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. But here's what gives me hope as we face our own crossroads. The monuments they left behind aren't just warnings, they're invitations. Invitations to join a conversation that has been ongoing for tens of thousands of years. A conversation about what it means to be an intelligent species on a living planet. The energy signatures we've detected aren't just broadcasting to our instruments. They're resonating with something deeper, something that connects us to the same cosmic patterns that guided their civilization. We're not just discovering their technology, we're remembering our own potential. Every breakthrough we make, every connection we forge between distant archaeological sites, every quantum field we learn to interpret is bringing us closer to understanding what we really are. Not just the latest in a series of random evolutionary accidents, but the inheritors of a legacy that stretches back through geological time. The question isn't whether Atlantis was real. The evidence has settled that beyond any reasonable doubt. The question is whether we're ready to accept the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Because once we acknowledge that advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before us, once we accept that we're walking a path that others have traveled, we can no longer pretend that our choices don't matter. We can no longer assume that technological progress inevitably leads to a better future. The monuments are watching. The quantum networks are evaluating our every decision. And somewhere in the crystalline chambers that still pulse with ancient energy, systems that have maintained their vigil for 12,000 years are deciding whether to reveal the final secrets of planetary engineering. The curriculum is accelerating, the tests are becoming more challenging, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But we're not facing these challenges alone. For the first time in human history, we have access to the accumulated wisdom of a planetary civilization. We have the guidance of ancestors who achieved everything we dream of achieving, and who paid the ultimate price for their mistakes. Their failures can light our way around the pitfalls. Their successes can show us possibilities we haven't yet imagined. And their love for the generations that would follow them, encoded in monuments built to last for geological ages, can inspire us to make choices worthy of the legacy we've inherited. The age of ignorance is ending, the age of responsibility is beginning, and the story of Atlantis, that eternal mystery that has captivated human imagination for thousands of years, is finally revealing its true purpose. It was never just about a lost civilization. It was about preparing us for this moment, when we would have the knowledge to either transcend our limitations or repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. The choice, as it has always been, is ours, but now we make it with the wisdom of ages to guide us. The monuments are waiting, the network is active, and in the quantum fields that connect all consciousness across space and time, the echo of Atlantis whispers one final message. Remember who you are, remember where you came from, and choose wisely what you become, because the future isn't just watching, it's participating. And somewhere in the depths of possibility, the next chapter of human civilization is waiting to be written. The question isn't whether we'll survive the challenges ahead. The question is whether we'll emerge from them worthy of the stars our ancestors once navigated, wise enough to tend the garden planet they died protecting, and humble enough to join the cosmic conversation they began so long ago. The story of Atlantis ends where our story begins, at the moment of choice, at the crossroads of destiny, where the wisdom of the past meets the potential of the future, and a species finally grows up enough to claim its birthright among the stars. The waters grow still around us as our journey reaches its final destination. But this isn't truly an ending. It's a beginning disguised as a conclusion, a moment when everything we've discovered transforms from ancient mystery into present reality. Standing here at the edge of understanding, with evidence of lost civilizations spread before us like scattered jewels in the sand, we face a truth that changes everything. The monuments aren't just relics of the past, they're active participants in our present, broadcasting their signals across quantum fields that connect all matter throughout the universe. Each discovery we've made has been guided by these ancient systems. Every breakthrough in our understanding has come precisely when we needed it most. The underwater ruins revealed themselves as our coastal cities faced rising seas. The global network emerged as we struggled to create sustainable international cooperation. The energy technologies manifested as we searched desperately for alternatives to the systems destroying our planet. This isn't coincidence, it's curriculum, a carefully orchestrated educational program designed by minds that understood the cyclical nature of civilizational development. They knew that intelligence alone wasn't enough to survive the cosmic forces that periodically reshape our world. They knew that wisdom had to be earned through experience, that responsibility had to be learned through consequence. The quantum signatures we've detected from monuments around the globe are strengthening, their broadcasts becoming clearer as our own civilization approaches the same technological capabilities that once connected their global empire. We're not just discovering their technology, we're inheriting it, piece by carefully released piece, as we demonstrate our readiness to handle each new level of understanding. But here's what makes this moment unprecedented in human history. For the first time, we have a choice that previous civilizations didn't have. We can learn from their mistakes before making them ourselves. We can see the consequences of certain paths before we've walked too far down them to turn back. The evidence shows us exactly what happens when technological capability outpaces wisdom, when global connectivity becomes global vulnerability, when the power to manipulate planetary systems falls into hands that haven't learned to respect the delicate balance of forces that sustain all life. The Atlantean civilization achieved remarkable heights. They built cities that could coordinate activities across entire continents. They developed technologies that could influence weather patterns and geological processes. They created communication networks that operated on principles we're only now beginning to understand. But they also created dependencies that proved fatal when cosmic forces disrupted their carefully maintained systems. They built their civilization on technologies they couldn't fully control, in locations that were vulnerable to the very planetary forces they sought to master. The cosmic impacts that ended their age weren't just environmental catastrophes, they were technological failures on a scale we can barely comprehend. When the central control systems failed, the entire global network collapsed simultaneously. Knowledge was lost not just locally, but across their entire planetary civilization. This is the warning encoded in every monument they left behind. This is the lesson preserved in the quantum fields that still pulse with their energy signatures. This is the truth that the recovery network has been waiting 12,000 years to share with a civilization ready to hear it. We stand at the same crossroads they once faced. We've achieved global connectivity through digital networks. We've developed technologies that affect planetary climate systems. We've created dependencies on complex technologies that few people fully understand. The question echoing through the crystalline chambers beneath our oceans is whether we'll make the same choices that led to their destruction, or whether we'll find the wisdom to chart a different course. The monuments are offering us more than just technical knowledge. They're providing a mirror, reflecting our own potential back to us with startling clarity. We can see what we might become if we choose wisely. We can also see what we might lose if we choose poorly. But the choice itself cannot be made for us. The ancient systems can guide, can educate, can warn and inspire, but they cannot decide. That responsibility belongs to us, just as it once belonged to them. The quantum networks are monitoring our progress, evaluating our responses to the challenges we face. Climate change, resource depletion, social fragmentation, the risk of cosmic impacts. These aren't just problems to be solved, they're tests to be passed, demonstrations of our readiness for the next level of knowledge. Each crisis we navigate successfully, each conflict we resolve through cooperation rather than destruction, each choice we make that prioritizes long-term sustainability over short-term gain, sends signals through the network that we're learning the lessons they died to teach us. The energy signatures are growing stronger because we're approaching a threshold, a moment when the full scope of their legacy could be revealed to minds that have proven worthy of the responsibility it entails. Technologies that could solve our energy crisis, knowledge that could help us survive cosmic threats, wisdom that could guide us toward a sustainable relationship with our planet. But this knowledge comes with obligations. The power to influence planetary systems must be balanced with the wisdom to know when not to use it. The ability to coordinate global activities must be coupled with respect for local autonomy and natural cycles. The capacity to reach for the stars must be grounded in love for the world that gave us birth. The monuments have been patient, waiting through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of countless cultures, for a civilization that could handle the full weight of their inheritance. They've watched our species struggle through darkness and ignorance, slowly rediscovering fragments of what was once common knowledge. Now, as we stand on the threshold of either transcendence or destruction, they're offering us one final gift. Not just the knowledge they preserved, but the opportunity to join the cosmic conversation they began so long ago. Because Atlantis wasn't the end of advanced civilization on Earth. It was the beginning of a much longer story, a tale of consciousness evolving through cycles of learning and growth, of wisdom hard-won through experience and loss. The quantum fields that connect all matter throughout the universe carry more than just energy and information. They carry intention, purpose, love. The love of parents for children they would never see. The love of teachers for students they could only hope would someday understand. The love of a species for the planet that sustained them and the cosmos that gave them birth. This love is what powers the recovery network. This love is what has maintained the monuments through 12,000 years of waiting. This love is what guides the curriculum that's preparing us for responsibilities we can barely imagine. As our investigation draws to its close, we find ourselves not at an ending, but at a commencement. A graduation ceremony for a species that has finally learned enough to be trusted with the keys to its own future. The evidence is overwhelming. The connections are undeniable. The implications are staggering. But the most important revelation isn't about what happened in the past, it's about what's possible in the future. We are the inheritors of a legacy that stretches back through geological time. We are the students in a school that operates on cosmic scales. We are the children of ancestors who loved us enough to build monuments that could outlast ice ages, preserve knowledge through dark ages, and guide us home when we were finally ready to return. The story of Atlantis is our story. The wisdom of the ancients is our birthright. The responsibility for the future is our sacred trust. The monuments are singing now, their quantum harmonies resonating across the planet as systems that have slumbered for millennia begin to awaken. The crystalline chambers are lighting up with energy patterns that haven't been seen since the last great civilization reached for the stars. We're no longer alone in the universe. We never were. We're part of a conversation that has been ongoing for eons, participants in a cosmic curriculum designed to help consciousness itself evolve toward greater wisdom and compassion. The choice before us isn't just about survival. It's about transformation, about becoming worthy of the legacy we've inherited and the love that preserved it for us through the long night of forgetting. The waters are calling, the monuments are singing, and somewhere in the quantum fields that connect all consciousness across space and time, our ancestors are waiting to welcome us home. The age of Atlantis isn't ending, it's beginning again, and this time we have the wisdom to make it last. Welcome to your inheritance. Welcome to your responsibility. Welcome to the cosmic conversation that has been waiting 12,000 years for your voice. The future is listening, the past is watching, and the present moment holds infinite possibility for a species finally ready to claim its place among the stars.